Hello and welcome, fellow motorsports fans. We do have quite a bit of feeder series racing to get through, and interestingly this time out, in every single event covered we did have a new champion crowned, which I thought is quite interesting and probably not going to happen too much more often in the future, so I just had to point it out. Unlike what we normally do, this time we begin with the fastest category. We begin with the Formula Regional European Championship, and here, as is tradition at this point, Prema did dominate the headlines. First of all, we had Rafael Camara finally officially secure his title, as Kucharczyk did have a crucial DNF, which sort of sealed the deal. Obviously, this is no surprise, as Camara has really been the man to beat all year long, but interestingly, this time he actually wasn't even the quickest Prema on track. It was in fact James Wharton who bagged a pair of pretty dominant / controlled wins, call it whatever you want, but I found it was a very convincing performance and really just continuing this pretty surprising trajectory that Wharton's career has taken this year, with just exceptional performances all year round. Unfortunately, Kucharczyk was still more or less mediocre, but we will see more next season, I'm sure. Since we can't just talk about the top teams, let's put the spotlight on Van Amersfoort Racing, where it is still very much Brando Badoea as the man to beat in the squad, even though yes, a 10-second penalty did kind of cost him a P4 in the championship to Alessandro Giusti, at least for now. We also had his teammate Pedro Claro with a key weekend compared to Ivan Dominguez. Let's not forget these two are battling for the rookie title. And yeah, Claro did get his second podium of the year, and he still has a mathematical chance of stealing the rookie title from Noah Stromstad, even though it'll very much be an uphill battle. When we look at this team, let's not forget that by normal people's standards, Brando Badoea is also a rookie though, so he is very much the best looking guy in this team right now. Yes, the rookie title is scored differently, but it is his first year in the car and we should judge him accordingly. Santelog Racing also followed up from Théophile Nial's strong win last time out, this time consistent points from both Nial and Enzo Peugeot, and a few really sweet moves from Nial in the second race in particular. I show a couple to you here. Unfortunately, Matteo De Paolo's season is really just not going all too well. Once again, getting caught up in too much chaos and unfortunate moments. So really, I think his current standings don't quite reflect how fast he has been, but also at some point you have to take responsibility for actually, stringing together a clean season, as it were. Then everybody's favorite category, Debut Watch, where here we had Jet Bowling with his first race on the European continent, coming over as a Formula Regional Americas competitor. Unfortunately, his performance was just about what you would expect from a forgettable midfielder in the very small Formula Regionals America midfield, so I wasn't expecting anything. He didn't deliver anything. I guess it was as it should be. We continue with a quick sidetrack to the Euroformula Open, which we have skipped last time out because the series is still the same old shit show, truth be told. Only 7 cars entered every single weekend, and Brad Benavides still more or less untouchable, not quite on track, but at least in terms of the championship. With this one, I'm actually not quite sure. I might have been lying in the intro. I'm not entirely sure if he has mathematically locked this one in or not, but even if he hasn't, then he very much will in the first race next time out. I am only bringing up the category altogether because of Vladislav Ryabov returning after a year, more or less just missing in action, and actually taking a pretty neat win on debut in the third race. So yeah, sure, it is Euroformula Open, but still it is the best story to come out of this particular paddock this weekend, so I thought it deserved a shout out. We continue with one of the categories that very much has had its champion locked in with GB3 at Brands Hatch. Unfortunately, and this will also apply for the GB4 segment, Brands Hatch is just a bit of a bad track for modern day Formula racing, so there just wasn't all that much racing altogether. Even in tricky conditions, overtaking was proving very difficult. Nonetheless, obviously the title fight in GB3 has been exciting all year long. with a title fight mostly down to the wire. Yes, Louis Sharp did have a pretty nice buffer coming into this, but ultimately he could have also still very much thrown it away. A strong win in the second race made him eventually lock in the title. And of course, he is a very deserved champion in his rookie year. What a talent he has been. And I am very much looking forward to see him in, well, I suppose Rodin in F3. Everything else would be a huge surprise at this point. Let's bring up the other key players in the title fight. First of all, we had John Bennett, mostly doing what he could really, and to be fair, for me personally, he really was the surprise of the year. Fantastic performances all year round in what I would at least expect to be the worst of the top three cars, so Rodin, High Tech and the JHR development. So I think he had an excellent season, although just given the fact that his teammates are both not rated particularly highly and didn't perform at all. So this makes it quite difficult to, accurately judge how good Bennett really is. But again, he is a candidate I would very much like to see in F3 next season. The same can still be said for the leading high-tech driver, Kucharczyk. Although with him in particular, we have talked about it over the course of the season, there is no doubt about his pace. I also think he performs reasonably well under pressure, even. It's not like his mistakes have come at particularly relevant moments throughout the year, but it's just that he has made too many crucial mistakes over this season, and this is something he really needs to sort out going into Formula 3 next year, or he might end up looking pretty poor. Louis Sharp obviously wasn't the only high-profile rookie coming into the year either, though. We also had Will McIntyre, sort of the other very competent high-tech driver. He did unfortunately cost himself P4 in the championship with a dumb move in the second race, so Mackenzie Cresswell could more or less end up stealing this one with a very satisfying win to end his year as well, so that's all pretty cool. It's very difficult to judge McIntyre as well, but he is very much one of those who maybe he had hoped for a tiny bit more going into the year even, but he still had an excellent performance, and I would say he is a key favorite to return next year and just take the title, or I suppose I could also see him step up to F3, very much depending on his budget, of course, as is always the case. We do have two key shoutouts to make for this series though. First of all, the one I do shout out quite regularly, American Nikita Johnson, this time with his second win in the series. Again, only the reverse grid race, but it was a very controlled lights to flag victory, about as good as it gets given the circumstances he was in. And we know he's not a front running car, so this is really all he can do. And then last but not least, Tom Mills, reigning GB4 champion, dominant reigning GB4 champion, finally back in the car after 1 year of, I suppose, coaching for KMR and doing other things on the side, trying to string together some sort of racing budget. And at least according to his Instagram, he has now used his scholarship from winning next year to get this little race weekend going and show what he's capable of. Unfortunately, nothing to write home about, but then again, in a backmarker car, in a one-off appearance at the end of the year, so there really wasn't any expectations on him. I just sincerely hope this wasn't the last we've heard of him. Anyway, let's talk about the slower classes in F4. We stay at Brands Hatch, but we continue with the slower classes in GB4. And here, Linus Granfors has done enough to take the title, but truth be told, KMR very much dominated the headlines this weekend, with Harry Burgoyne Jr. and Lucas Blakely taking a win each. Blakely had a bit of an odd spin on the formation lap of the third race to end his season on a hilarious low note, but I don't think this takes away anything from the stellar performances he has put in over the course of the year. Since we've talked about GB4 a lot and consistently, and there hasn't really changed a whole lot over the course of the year at the sharp end, I do want to highlight a couple of the midfielders because, well, I feel like otherwise we would never talk about them. And namely, Brendan Templeton and Callum Baxter as really a consistent pair at sort of the best of the rest tier, even beating Finn Harrison in the standings despite lacking the same sort of upside top results, which was honestly quite surprising for me to see in the final standings. Just sort of by feel, I would have expected Harrison to be ahead of them. As I said, we've talked about the rest of the grid at length, but those two don't really get any mentions, so there you go, these are your shout-outs. Talking about Elite Motorsports and Finn Harrison, they ended their season on the perfect high, taking a 1-2 with Finn Harrison leading ahead of Alicia Palmowski. Palmowski just about managed to get enough overtakes in the reverse grid race to also steal P2 in the championship from Harry Bourgogne Jr. by a single point, which I thought was a pretty cool storyline playing out. Obviously, the pair are two of my personal favorites from the series. I am very much looking forward to see what Palmowski can do in F1 Academy next season. Obviously, she'll get the female scholarship from GB4. And in the case of Finn Harrison, I think probably British F4 would be his next best career step if I was his manager making the choices. But of course, I could see him staying in GB4, going to GB3, very much budget dependent. Either way, I hope he sticks around in Formula Cars. And then last but not least, another guy I hope sticks around in Formula Cars is of course Lucas Blakely, where his future is really a big question mark. He came into the series like halfway through the season with little budget, but really delivered fantastic results right out of the gate and did about as well as you could expect from anyone just randomly coming in mid-season into a series like this. And GB4 really is the series of the budget strugglers, right? With the likes of Brendan McHagan and Marcus Luzio also disappearing over the course of the year. Obviously, Tom Mills, the reigning champion, being gone for an entire season. So while GB4 itself provides a really great product and apparently at a really affordable price, I hope they can sort out a way to actually push their best competitors up the ladder a little bit more. But then again, this is the great problem to solve in just about any kind of motorsport. We continue in Italian F4, where once again a title secured as Freddie Slater has broken the win record and has secured the title before the last round with controlled wins in the first and the second race. Yet again, his sort of the Freddie Slater classic at this point. Yes, he was helped a tiny bit by some key stalls further up the order because, truth be told, Prema probably wasn't the most competitive package this weekend. Us Racing really looked like the guys to beat, which also translated to Jack Beaton finally finding his maiden victory after trying for a couple of years now, and 7 P2s this year alone, which by the way is a lot more than I would have thought just off the top of my head. So there you go, take this statistics. I'm still not quite sure what to make of Jack Beaton, but at least his consistency has been pretty remarkable throughout the season, even if probably his peak potential isn't too exciting in my humble opinion. We did have a new face in the Prema camp this weekend, debuting Alexander Bondarev. Now, this is a name you're probably familiar with if you follow single-seater racing, because obviously he is a Williams junior and he has a fantastic karting CV. He'll be one of the key contenders next year, there is no doubt about it. I wouldn't, maybe not expect him to do a Slater. Slater is really one of the biggest prospects since Kimi Antonelli. Clearly, I wouldn't put him into the same category, but it's safe to say he'll appear in my top 5 karting graduates of 2024 video, that is for sure. So it was cool to see him on track. It was a very quiet debut, nothing really worth talking about in that sense, but I thought it was pretty funny how close he was to struggling Dion Gauda in terms of on-track performance, which I suppose says a lot more about Dion Gauda than it probably says about Bondarev. With Italian F4, and we have talked about it a lot, yes, the Prema battle is super interesting and these are all the names we'll see for the next couple of years in all the big series, but really in terms of the entertainment factor and also the discussion factor, the rest of the top 10, sort of the lower points positions, are where it's at in terms of discussion potential for me. And here I want to highlight first of all Maxim Reim, once again with a very good weekend in terms of pace, even though yes, he only actually ended up scoring in one of the races. There was potential for 3-point scoring finishes there, make no mistake. Then we also had Alpine Junior, I believe, even though my brain still can't quite comprehend why he is signed to an academy. Kabir Anurag with his first points of the year in the series, and it was actually, I mean, okay, I don't want to say it could have been a podium, that's too much, but like he was close-ish to the podium, a lot closer than one would have expected from him. So there you go, breakout drive of the year for him. Let's hope there is any more to that going forward. Then we had Davide Larini with an epic restart in one of the races to score for the first time since the second round. And then last but not least, probably my highlight in terms of overtaking of the weekend, we had a young Enea Frey in the third race, scoring points from outside the top 20 by just picking apart the midfield so methodically. I don't know, it was truly beautiful to watch him rise up the order like it's nobody's business, while everyone else was struggling to really get some good moves going. Either way, this is your time for the comments. Let me know down in the comments who is your favorite driver outside of that top 10 in the standings right now. There's another new face in the midfield though, even though he has been on the grid all year long, Edu Robinson. He was on the grid all year long, I say, but he was part of AS Motorsport, so he wasn't really on the grid. His battle was basically to finish within the top 30, so nothing particularly interesting. But here he was filling the seat of Matheus Ferreira at US Racing, and as I said, US Racing brought a really competitive package, so Edu Robinson was also surprisingly competitive. He was threatening points every single race, including a great quali performance. Yes, it hasn't quite worked out for him. He has slipped out of the points in all of these races, but it is clear to see that, yes, sometimes it is the car holding you back, even in these bottom tier championships. I mean, for all of us watching them, I know this isn't any big surprise, but every now and then you just need a little bit of proof to know, yeah, in a back market car, really nobody can do much. Anyway, time for karting report. Over in the karting world, we had two key events I want to cover. First of all, the Champions of the Future Shifter Cup, which is a standalone event, hence why they are also technically now champions of this event. Everybody who won the race is here, and effectively this is the preparation race for the shifter portion of the Karting World Championship coming up in 2 weeks' time. In KZ2, we had very experienced Daniel Vasile securing the win in the final ahead of DKM champion Markus Kayak. We've talked about him last week, but here really the story of the weekend in terms of the younger drivers is the return of Artem Severiukhin. I can't pronounce his name. You may have heard of him because he was the Russian driver, got banned 2 years ago for showing the Nazi salute on the podium of one of the FIA European Karting Championship events. So a very reasonable young human being, of course, as you can imagine. He has now been unbanned and has returned to top-level karting, and it turns out he may be a cunt, but he is absolutely rapid. He has been dominating the entire weekend. He just got very unlucky at the start of the final, and he still put himself onto the podium, so his performance was truly stunning, and I hate to say it, but judging from this, he is very much the favorite going into the World Championship in 2 weeks' time. Fortunately for us at least, his future is, like with most of the young Russian drivers, very much unclear, so maybe we won't have to see his face in any of the good Formula Series, but who knows, time will really tell. There was a lot of other really well-running youngsters like Maxim Orlov, we've talked about him of course, Van Werfen, Timo Youngling, so a lot of good young drivers, but I want to put the spotlight on one of those good but not quite as good youngsters, and it is Miguel Costa, the Modena Parolin driver. And he is a guy I've noticed for a couple years now he is quick, but not like amazingly quick. So he is a midfield kind of driver most of the times. Maybe you could say like upper midfield. It's very difficult to define these terms clearly at the karting events, right? But you know, he's not a podium threat. Let's put it this way. I don't think I've seen him on a podium yet in the last couple of years. But he thinks he is really, really good. Now, I know they all do and they have to. It's a racing driver thing, yada, yada, yada. But for him in particular, I want to highlight how after every single weekend, he comes out complaining about the competition, how everybody's driving like assholes and everything. And I feel like, come on, you know, if it happens every time, maybe start looking somewhere else for the reason. Either way, he has confirmed he'll graduate to F4 next season, so that's why I wanted to point it out, to give you some, you know, framework for your expectations for Miguel Costa wherever he'll get announced for next season. It wasn't just KZ2 competing though, we also had the top tier of karting, the KZ category racing. Now obviously it's arguable whether or not that is the best competition, and it's an argument you can have in the comments if you want. I don't want to right now. We had a win for CRG led by Louis Iglesias, but it was really superstar Senna van Wolstein coming up with an absolutely epic drive, stealing the show, charging through the very competitive top 10 pack. to challenge for the win. Yes, he didn't quite get it, but these are really these sort of, I don't know, inspirational drives for me. No youngsters in this category, but since I want to include karting more often in the future, there is no way around this, at least on paper, top tier of the sport. It wasn't just shifter karts competing though, we also had some other key European competition in the WSK Euro Series in 4 categories, at least 4 categories we'll talk about here. First of all, the Mini Under 10s, Mason Robertson securing the title with back-to-back wins, taking the lead from Nicolo Parroco on the last lap. Very much reminiscent of the first round really in some ways. Also just a very fitting duel, the ace drivers of Energy Course and Baby Race driver respectively. So, you know, congratulations to both of these drivers, and they are 2 key names. I've talked about Parroco quite a bit anyway. There's a new highlight appearing here though, and that's Stapan Mazepin with his maiden podium and a great performance throughout the weekend. And if the name Mazepin rings a bell for you, then congratulations, you've been watching F1 in the last couple of years. But this really is a big question mark for me because I don't know if they are related. If they are, this means we will for sure see him in Formula Racing at some point because of course they are absolutely loaded. So if any of you have any information on this, please let me know. Then to the slightly older mini racers, we did have some very fitting results yet again with team driver with a 1-2, ace driver Daniel Miron Lorente winning the final and the title in dominant fashion ahead of teammate Alexander Leganki. The latter is still yet to find a win in the category, but he was last year's superstar in the tier below in the under 10s, so it is surely only a matter of time to first of all when he'll start winning again, and I guess he will sort of take Daniel Miron Lorente's place as the ace driver in that particular team whenever Miron Lorente finally graduates to the juniors. Talking about the juniors, here we had a couple key competitors leaving, we'll get to that in a second, but this of course opened the door for other drivers to show what they are capable of. And here in particular we had Forza Racing with its American duo of drivers Jack Iliff and Devon Waltz stealing the show for an American 1-2. And yeah, I am really looking forward to where this goes in the coming months. Yes, this could have been a great weekend for Kamiab. Unfortunately it wasn't. He did get taken out by Lopez. Shit happens, but yeah, a cool new look at what next year's OK Juniors will look like. And we had a very similar thing playing out with the seniors, because here we had 2 absolutely key names graduating, giving their debut with the adults, Niklas Schaufler and Christian Costoya. We've talked about both of these in the past. Costoya is probably the best not F1 affiliated driver at the moment in karting, and it was a good day for Red Bull Juniors overall because it was Scott Lindblom, also recently signed, who absolutely dominated the race and the weekend and got the title for himself. Schaufler also got himself a pole position and debut and worked his way to a podium in the final despite struggling at the start. And then last but not least, Christian Costoya, also excellent on debut by taking P2, but also very quickly sort of breaking away from the pack to make it clear that he is a very convincing P2. He was more or less matching Lindblom out front, so a great performance there. Anyway, that's all from the driving, but since now we are nearing the end of the season, it's time to talk about some driver news. It's the end of the year. This segment will be happening in about every episode now as the new lineups for next year start coming in. And we begin in F1, where it's now confirmed that actually, yes, Daniel Ricciardo is out, Liam Lawson is in at VCARB, and not just for next season, but effective immediately. Now, there's 2 sides to this story from my point of view. Is it a good choice to replace Ricciardo with Liam Lawson? Well, I suppose we can do it even more concrete. Is it a good choice to replace Ricciardo? I'd say probably. We know his potential, he has peaked already. Obviously he is having a pretty good run against Tsunoda at the moment, but I mean, it's never gonna go beyond the midfield again, I don't think. So replacing Ricciardo, good. Bringing him Lawson, no discussion to be had, absolutely good, absolutely deserves a shot, especially given he is a Red Bull Junior and has been for years. Now, the thing that shouldn't have happened is the way they just randomly replaced him in the middle of the season. That's disgusting. Not giving him a proper send-off after he has been in the series for so long, has been a Red Bull driver for so long, coming back to the team even. So I don't know why they would handle it this poorly, and I'm really sad about it, but either way, I think the actual decision behind it is the correct one. Then we have an announcement for Formula E, which is Zane Maloney is going to join Taylor Barnard as a rookie coming from F2 to Formula E next season. He'll be driving for the more or less new Lola, Yamaha, Apt Motorsports, whatever that team is going to be called, going up against Luca Di Grassi. Obviously, that will be a really interesting matchup. I think it's sad that Zane was not considered for the Audi seat at all, apparently, but of course they also don't consider Kucharczyk, so who knows what's going on over in that camp. I am just glad he's making the jump to proper professional racing. Then, probably the best announcement of the week, Callum Ilott joining Prema's IndyCar roster. Obviously, this has been rumored all year and was sort of an obvious choice to make from Prema's point of view. He is a former Prema guy, he's still super young, but he's got IndyCar experience, so really just ticks all of these boxes, and I suppose Prema agrees. So there you go, this is really a match made in heaven, and I am so looking forward to see Callum Ilott back in IndyCar. I think it's a disgrace he wasn't racing full-time this year in the first place. Staying over in IndyCar for the next two, we also had Marcus Armstrong obviously having to leave Chip Ganassi Racing as Chip Ganassi is downsizing to only 3 cars. So he is actually going to fill the second seat next to Felix Rosenqvist over at Marshank Racing. I suppose this is a pretty good match. Marcus Armstrong has been one of the, quietly better Chip Ganassi drivers, at least. Very much looking like the third guy next to the overwhelming Scott Dixon and Alex Palou, so not an easy role to fill, and I think he did a pretty good job. I think he will give Felix Rosenqvist a pretty good run for his money next year. And then, last but not least, we have Alexander Rossi, finally officially replaced. He is in fact returning to IndyCar, but I would say with a somewhat disappointing move, ending up replacing Rinus VeeKay over at Ed Carpenter Racing. Replacing VeeKay, I think, is almost a little harsh. I thought he had a pretty good season, all things considered. We know with Ed Carpenter, it's really, the drivers can only do so much with the machinery provided, right? So I think VeeKay did a decent job, nothing to be ashamed of at all. But then again, Alexander Rossi is an upgrade. So I think it's an understandable decision, even though a pretty sad one for VeeKay. And I am curious to see, will he end up? Because I suppose his IndyCar days are numbered. And then, last news of the day, and the first for the feeder series, the big news segment we'll be covering over the coming weeks, and that's Charlie Wirtz announced as the first Trident Formula 3 driver for next season. I think that is a fantastic match for both sides, really. Obviously, especially for Charlie Wirtz, going to Trident, you are going to what probably is the top team in F3 at this point. And from Trident's perspective, I think he is a really decent bet. I hope he's not their best driver or, the one you'd expect before the season to be the best driver. I hope he's got someone really strong to test himself against. But I think Charlie Wirtz is slightly underrated because of his FRECA campaign last year, even though that has been clearly the outlier in his career so far. I thought he did about what he could in the Genta last year, at least with the data we have from the outside. So I am looking forward to see this partnership. Now then, that was a lot, as is always the case, and it just won't stop because the motorsports world just never stops turning. Anyway, this is your time to let me know all of your opinions about these roster moves and about the series we've discussed down in the comments, and otherwise I thank you all for watching and I hope to catch you in the next one.